Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. How's it been going, Mark?
It's been going well. Hey, you remember what last episode was?
I do remember what last episode was, our 100th episode.
So this is 101.
This
We
is
keep
101.
going.
And we're, I think one of the big themes that we had in the 100th episode was that we were going to keep going, and that, there was a lot that's new out there to discover. And I feel like going into this week, it was all about discovering the new things to talk about.
Yeah, so it's, as a programmer, been at it for 30 plus years, and there's just lots new to learn. It's not like you have to go back to college to learn another programming language or another framework or, the latest technology. It's just something that's baked in as part of the career as being a developer. One of the things I like the most actually is that there's lots to learn, and you can learn as much or as little as you want. You can be really focused on something, or you can kind of be more broad or somewhere in the middle.
I would agree. It is one of the both best and worst things about being in this industry, because it's great that there's always new stuff out there, and that we're always pushing the envelope, and that we're always finding something new. And it's bad because sometimes you feel like you're just on this treadmill.
Yeah.
And you have to keep running just to stay in place.
True. I felt that too. So yeah. It's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. So what new have you learned this week?
So interesting. My kind of pursuits of new things this week has led me to a no-code tool used in a slightly different way.
Oh, interesting.
So you're familiar with VoiceFlow?
Yes.
It's
VoiceFlow.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's incredibly popular out there. It's one of the best. I think people mostly see it as a design tool, though.
Yeah, some people look at it as a design tool or prototyping, but you can use it to build Alexa skills and Google Actions, conversation apps for the time being. And you can deploy it, and so there's lots that you can do with it. I know a number of the people that work at VoiceFlow, people from their dev team and product teams, kind of up and down the org chart there at VoiceFlow. Great group of people. So I heard about something that I hadn't heard about before, which was kind of interesting, and so I wanted to check it out. So with VoiceFlow, if you haven't used it before, you create a flow, kind of like a flow chart, kind of like a graphing tool, and you say this intent comes in, and this is what you say back, and there's different code paths and logic, and you can do all kinds of things, right? So you can prototype or in this, or if it gets to a certain point and it's not and it fits in with what you're trying to do for your voice app, then you could use that as handles all of your dialogue management. The flow. If you say this, then you go to this branch, and if you say this, then you go. So it takes it all the way through that. So what's new and what's kind of cool about this is that there's a new API called the Dialogue Management API, and it's out public. You can check that out on the developer docs. We'll have a link for that in the video, but it's basically an API that you can call to initiate each turn of a conversation. And based on what you say, well, it starts out with a launch command to this API. So there's like a launch action, which would start the flow. And then the response that you get back is going to be any of the text to speech or visual information that you would need to say back to the user. That comes back as the response to the API. Go ahead.
Right, and these are things that you've built into the flow. So when you're building the flow, you will say things like, when this intent gets fired, or when these phrases are fired, these are the things that you will send back. This is the state that changes, and here's what you'll send back to a client.
Yeah, here's the text response or
the visual response or whatever.
The visual response. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then there's also a text action that is the phrase of what you said. So it doesn't take much to think about that. That could be the engine for what you're building. And then it could be like, oh, I'm going to do a chat bot. So I'm going to do a web front end that whatever I type is going to get passed to this dialogue management API. And it's going to come back. And this is the text that the chat box is going to say back. And you can write a chat bot, or you can write a voice app, or you can write an IVR system or whatever. Yeah.
So when we say in this case, you can write a chat bot, what you're really saying is I can, create a web page that has a text input, and whatever the user types there, I will send it to this API, and whatever comes back, I will display in the response field.
Yes, it becomes your engine or the core to what you're building, and you can put your client layer, facade, or whatever over top of what, how you want to expose that. But it could be a mobile app that you capture the microphone. It calls this API with the text of what you said, assuming that you're doing ASR on the client, for example, and then it could call this API with what you said, and it would move the flow to wherever it was in the next spot and say, this is where you're at, this is the response, and it will get back. And so it's interesting because you could have somebody like a designer design the whole flow in voice flow. It could start out as a prototype, and then you could build it to something more application ready. And then the dev team, ideally could package that up in whatever client it needed to be, but
builds the front end however they need it to be.
Yeah, exactly. So
now, I mean, the interesting thought to me is this is fantastic, and Dialogflow has a similar API to it. They have an API they call the Detect Intent API. And again, the same thing is you send whatever the user just did, presumably what they just typed in or what they said or whatever, along with some state information that was handed back to you last time. And again, it hands back a response and some more state information that you'll hand back the next time.
So that's interesting because there's two different APIs actually. VoiceFlow has a dialogue management API that is stateful and one that is stateless.
Oh, interesting. So it will manage the entire state for you?
Yes. So if you're doing the stateful API, then the inputs that you need is you need to know what the ID of the project is in VoiceFlow that you're going against. You need to have a unique user ID, but that's system defined, right? So like you could, if it's a website, that's let's say that the chat experience is something that shows up after login, then you would have to, then you would know what user or what GUID or whatever string you wanted to use to represent that user in the system.
Right. Or if not, you create a GUID and store it in a cookie and
yeah, exactly. So there's lots of different things that you can do it. And yeah, so, and you don't have to be logged in if you didn't want to be, but there has to be something that represents this particular user so that their flow and state information is separate from somebody else's. But that's it. You call the API with the action of launch, you get back the response. And then after that, it's the same API call, but you would send it as action being text and you'd send the text, but all the other pieces of information that you need to know, like I said, the VoiceFlow project and the user ID, and that's it. And VoiceFlow itself would keep track of the state. If you wanted to do the stateless API, then it's kind of more like what you described with Dialogflow. You'd pass the information. Initially, there is no state, but as part of the response, you'll get back the state that you would manage and store someplace or round trip it or however you're going to do it. And then on the next request, you would send that state in and then back, and it would come back. And that state is the thing that keeps track of where you are in the whole flow. But the stateful API is pretty slick because
very slick. Yes.
They worry about that. So don't be confused, as your client doesn't have to be stateful at all. It's VoiceFlow is keeping track of the state based on the user ID and what project you're on.
Very cool.
Yeah.
No, that's something that I will somehow have to try to find time to look into more.
Yeah, so
My,
I haven't really pushed the boundaries, and seeing how dynamic it is, or kind of where the edges are. But I think it's fairly new, and I just discovered it last week, and started looking at it over the weekend and into this week. And so I don't know. It's kind of funny because it's no code, but as a developer, you could write code to use
it.
to
Yeah.
wrap the no code, which is kind of cool. I like it.
Oh, very, very nice.
How about you? What you've been doing these days?
Well, I've been relearning Android programming again with the actions on Google twist on top.
Yep.
And it's been, in some ways, it's been fun because, like, as we talked about, it's new stuff that's building on top of stuff that I'm familiar with.
Right.
And on the other hand, some of it's a little bit frustrating because there's new concepts that I thought I had a good mental model of, and when I go to try them out, they're not quite mesh. Or one of the challenges is that there's a lot of additional stuff that you need to plug in to your IDE every time you do something new. So it's also a matter of, okay, do I have the right Google libraries? Do I have the right Android API platforms installed?
Right.
Actions, the app action module for Android Studio is an additional plugin, so I need to get that installed. Oh, and don't forget that I need to set up keys to upload things to the Play Store, and I need to make sure I've got an account that will get on the Play Store, and that account should be the same account as the one that's my assistant is going to be using it. So it's a lot of little pieces that
those can sometimes be the most challenging things, because you're like, this isn't working. Why isn't this working? And sometimes you find something in the documentation, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just play with it and you're like, oh, this has to be the same, or I have to do this first and then I can do this, or
and some of it is, there's one line in the documentation that, in the step-by-step manual that just says, now sign the keys, and it goes on, and you're like, signing the keys is a 3-screen process.
Yeah.
If it's you can't dismiss it with just one line.
And if it's not something that you do all the time, or this is your first time doing it, you're like, how do I sign those keys again?
Right.
So now you're off like trying to find, you want to go down this track and just get down here, but you have to like take all these little kind of twists and turns of, I got to do this.
Right.
Okay, now
one of the great things about hypertext systems is that we have links that go everywhere, and one of the downsides is that we have links that go everywhere.
Yeah.
And you suddenly find yourself off in a rabbit hole where you're like, wait, how did I get here? And did I really need to know all of this? And the answer in some cases is no, you didn't. In some cases, yes, you did.
Yeah.
One of the interesting parts, though, is I was getting really frustrated about going through this code lab, and I had to stop and pause and say, 5 years ago, when I did the first code lab for what we now call conversational actions, there was a lot of following links and doing stuff that wasn't clear why you needed to do them, and a lot of, just trust me and turn this on. And later, of course, you understand why you need to do that.
Yeah.
But right now, you just want to get something running. And why do I need to why do I need to set up a key in Firebase? Why? So that's kind of where I am right now, is working on little projects and taking it slow and just trying to make sure I really understand what I'm doing as I get into this, and as I try to do some cool ideas that I have, and seeing, just how well I can start to approach those ideas.
Yeah.
It's
interesting.
I only have a year to move everything over to this. So you got to get started somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. And you kind of have to figure out, the sooner you figure it out, then the more time you have to kind of, play around with it and do something, and then kind of evaluate if the approach that you took was was the best approach, or could you do something else that would, make it better or save you time or something?
Right.
And
be able to show something and say, and talk to other people and say, here's what I did and here's how I did it, and start getting feedback to say, well, look at this other way of doing it. Did you try this? Here are the roadblocks I had. Oh, here are the roadblocks I had. How do we, solve those problems? So it's a challenge, and some days it's frustrating. But small steps. I got to remember I need to get past the basic building blocks first.
Yeah, no, and that's the same thing. Like I feel like in some ways with Jovo 4, I've had to start over, and it's like, okay, where's the good example on how to do these different things? And you're like, well, that's this particular part's not out there. I guess I create it and kind of, I figure it out, and hopefully other people will be able to take stuff that I did and be able to move faster and jump in quicker on it.
One of the interesting things is some of the code I ran, I go and compile it, and it tosses up a bunch of errors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how can there be errors for this? So, I literally just copied someone else's code out of GitHub. How can there be errors on this project? So I go back to the repository, and sure enough, somebody else opened up 2 issues, identifying the problems and provided the code fixes.
Yep.
So, Google just hasn't gotten around to incorporating those fixes yet, but it was right there for me to look at, and I understood what they were doing, and I plugged them in, and it worked. So that's the nature of community that I think is wonderful in what we do and how we approach these sorts of things.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree that the company that's providing the tools or the APIs can go a long way to making things easy as well. So the documentation for this voice flow dialogue management stuff this is how you do it in the shell. And if I use curl, or if I use HTTP, I haven't ever used that one. This is what the code will look like for Node or for Ruby or PHP or Python, or I don't know, they've got like 20 other languages that they've got. And they have the API there and a node that says, try it out. And the part that I was stuck on, actually, that took in some ways longer, was I needed some authorization key, but the project that I had, I didn't have the access to an authorization key. And so I'm like, help, your documentation says go here to get the key, and that field isn't on that page. Like, oh, you don't have the right authorization for this project. I had kind of snuck around it though, because I was trying to work on a specific project that somebody else had done. And I had created an account just for me. And so I did have access to that key there. And so I was like, actually, I had, before they gave me access, I had exported the project and imported it into my account. And then I had, but right there on the web page, I could put in the form, I could click the try it button, edit the field values. I could see the JSON request. I could see the JSON response coming back. I'm like, whew.
One of the great things about Google used to have something they called the Google API Playground, where you would go and you could bring up any of Google's APIs and any of the calls in the APIs, and it would just bring up a form that said, here are all the possible fields, fill them in, and when you click run, it says log in and permit us to do this for you, and it would run it, and it'd show you, what the request looks like and what the response looks like, and you're like, well, okay, what if I go tweak this sort of thing? And you go tweak that and you see what the new JSON looks like, and you're like, well, the documentation says that the field needs to be in this particular format. What does that mean? And when you go fill out the fields, it only lets you fill in that format, or it's got widgets that let you click, and behind the scenes it generates that format for you so you can see what it looks like. Enabling things like that, it makes it so much easier to learn how to use an API.
Yeah, I was just surprised at how how easy it was. There was definitely a learning curve overall, and I was kind of incorporating.
Well, I think
I had a web project that kind of did voice and stuff, and took some of the stuff, and so I was trying to incorporate it into an existing project to make kind of like a quick, tap to talk assistant sample using a voice flow project. And I think overall it took me about 5 hours to do, but that's like learning the API, trying to figure out like, well, how do I even test this out? And it was probably like 250 lines of code total on, I had some stuff that I brought over and was able to reuse, but the new code that I wrote was probably only about 250 lines.
Yeah. So lots of interesting exploration to kick off our 101st episode. I'm sure we're going to be doing a lot more. I'm looking forward to exploring what's out there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great time to invite you to go ahead and share what you're learning. If you got questions, let us know what your questions are, but also let us know what are the types of things that you're learning kind of in the voice world. It might be something that's new to you or a new discovery on something that you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, and as always, you can share with us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in the comments below. Find us at Voice Lunch or my office hours. We are always happy to hear what you're doing, and we will see you another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, everyone.
Have a great week.
See you later, Alan.
You too, Mark.